Welcome everyone. This is David Uttersveld for Workout Wednesday Power BI Edition Week 23. And in this week, we are continuing looking at the Nobel Prize data set that Megan Longoria had started with last week, and we'll do that throughout the month of June here with various challenges. And the goal of this challenge is to build a cumulative line chart and then explore some aspects of the data here. But the line chart has a few different elements that I'll walk through in a second. And then there's some gotchas when it comes to some DAX and what have you, and just different ways of presenting the data that I've built into the challenge as well. But just in terms of basic functionality, for this line chart, it's just a standard Power BI line chart. And you can see here when I hover over, I have a report page tooltip, and I could have done a better job, it looks like, with various years, just making sure that the vertical lines up. You're not able to get this little scroll bar or scroll on a report page tooltip that you can see here for this particular year, and then maybe some of these other years. But hopefully you get the idea. And I'm just trying to use one of the methods within Power BI to present more detailed data, whereas the main chart starts at a more summary level. And the default tooltip in Power BI wouldn't quite get us anywhere close to all this level of detail. But you can see in this report page tooltip, here's just a basic table visual that provides detail about, in this case, individual years award winners across the various categories for the Nobel Prizes. And then this age of when awarded column that you'll see here is actually a measure that I've requested that you do in your requirements, but not add it as a column. So this is kind of a tricky thing. If you do a lot of things with Power BI and you first get started, the main temptation is, well, let's just calculate this in a column. And one of the gotchas I have is don't use a column, use a measure. So I'll show you how to do that in a second. And then also one element of the challenge as well said account for a 2020 award winner who did not have a birth date. And your averages could easily be thrown off if you just use kind of a standard average calculation for this age in a measure without accounting for that. So I'm using the word unknown as a substitute. I could use blank or unknown or whatever I wanted to do, but I don't want his age to appear as the year awarded, 2020, minus 0. So his age of 2020 would throw averages off across the board. So just trying to avoid that type of situation there. But another element here to call out is a few months ago, Power BI introduced this zoom slider, and I don't find an opportunity to use it too often, but I think that this would be a good opportunity just to say, well, here are two continents, Europe and North America, that have kind of dominated over time. But the zoom slider is a nice feature that allows me just to focus in on some of the way that other continents, or I guess Nobel winners within those continents, have kind of started to accumulate over time. And this is not one of the cumulative line charts, by the way, that sorry, let me go on do not disturb here. This will not be edited in post because I'm too lazy to do it. All right, so let me silence Microsoft Teams. But this is not one of the cumulative line charts that starts everything here in my bottom left corner saying for each of the years, let's just see how things accumulate from year one to year two or what have you, or I guess winter one to winter two. But this is just looking at the year on the axis. So you'll see things like Africa's first winter ended up being, in the year 1936, so on and so forth. So actually, sorry, so that's South America. I chose the high contrast color theme here, so it kind of threw me off because not Africa, Asia and South America are both kind of red there. But for South America's first winter, it was 1936. So anyway, I should probably stop chatting so much and get you into Power BI and some of the requirements. So you can see here for the post, I've got a list of requirements, create a measure for distinct count, create a measure for the running total. I'm going to use a quick measure. If you're comfortable with DAX, you may build this in your own manner, but I'll show you how to do it in a point and click way. And then create that kind of unique age when awarded measure that could be a column, but in this case we're going to use a measure, and it calls out some specifics about what I should or should not do there. Just add the line chart, create the zoom slider, and then create the report page tooltip. All right, so this data is on data.world, and what I'll do is I'll copy my data set here, and I'll shift over to Power BI. But we've got this data.world connector, and I will paste in my dataset ID and type out my owner name. And if you've never logged into data.world, it may prompt you to authenticate with your data.world information, but I've done that previously, so it's got that stored. And here I just simply need to select the Nobel Laureates. And I'm not going to hit load, I'm going to hit transform data. Because if you got far with this data set and you try to do some crazy things with your birth year calculation, your age calculation based on birth year, you'll notice some things. And so I don't know that it's really called out easily here sample-wise. Let's see if I can search. Yeah, great. So there are some birth years, or birth dates rather, across multiple years that have zeros for months and zeros for days. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is kind of fudging it a bit and saying if someone was born in any of these situations, we're going to replace the 00 with 01. And so we're just going to fudge it and say we don't have their exact birth date. We'll just pretend it's January 1st. And the basic idea of the challenge is not precision with the Nobel data. It's just to teach you some techniques about Power BI or see what you might already know about Power BI. So what I'll do is I'll just say right click on the column, choose replace values, and now I'll say value defined as 00, replace with 01. And what this will do now, if I come in and try to search for 00 again, it's gone. Find 01, and I would expect to see, uh, actually, this will be even more reliable. Just do the 001s, and everything that was previously 00 has now been replaced with January 1st. That would have caused some issues in the age calculation there, which unfortunately is kind of a minor thing when it comes to it for this challenge, but hey, it's some cleanup that you still have to do. All right, so other things you could do here, if you wanted to rename the column names, I did that for the ones that were relevant, but you can see here that, everything that I might want to do in terms of column names, data types, so on and so forth, you do all that cleanup on your own. I'm not going to go into that in detail today, but I did want to show you that replacement for the birth date. And then the other aspect is that some of these columns have this aspect of now. So you'll see things like city now, country now, and that's because when the Nobel Prize first started in 1901 and onward, the makeup of nations and states, particularly in Europe at that time, varied quite a bit, and that's been true throughout history of the 19th century, as the Nobel Prize has been awarded in various other continents too. We saw the breakup of colonialism in Africa and all these independent states becoming a reality, and so on and so forth. And the 20th century was actually a great uh, example of change when it comes to geography and boundaries, and it's just kind of an evolving process. So that's kind of a long-winded statement on I'm using the country now as it exists today, even though certain Nobel winners might be listed as being born in Prussia. Prussia no longer exists, or the Russian Empire. Warsaw used to be in the Russian Empire. Now it's within the nation of Poland, so on and so forth. You'll see examples of that, and just from a reliability perspective and be able to plot data on today's maps for future weeks and so on and so forth, I thought maybe the country now and continent now um, option would be your better bet than when they were originally born in whatever country existed back then. Once again, long-winded answer there. So anyway, I will hit close and apply and load my data. All right, so the first thing I need to do is create a distinct count of Nobel laureates. And the ID field here is not a distinct ID, but it is laureate IDs. And you'll notice if I flip over to the data option here, or data screen within Power BI, and just highlight ID, it tells me there's 962 rows, but 955 distinct values. That tells me right away that multiple people, or at least one person, has won multiple awards. In reality, there's actually been four Nobel laureates who have won two awards. So we're going to account for that with a distinct count instead of just a general count of rows. So I'm going to quickly create a measure, and I'll just call this laureates, and then just do distinct count of ID. And I'm using the IntelliSense here, and I can just hit enter based on one of the suggestions, close the parenthesis, and play with the formatting. You know, you've got the ability to use the measure tools and change the formatting. I'm not going to do any of that for the video, just to hopefully help speed things up. And then the next thing is to create a measure that gives me a running total. And here's where I can use this existing measure and create a new quick measure. So I hover over just one of the fields and say new quick measure and select a calculation. I find running total here, and it's based on laureates because that's what I selected here. And then I want to use award year as the field that is measured over. And then I hit OK, and it will automatically create this measure for me without me having to know any DAX. I can be dangerous and still create some DAX calculations. So we'll just create that and keep it at face value. As you grow deeper and deeper into DAX, you may tend to tweak some of this approach, but for somebody that's new to Power BI, quick measures can definitely be a big help when it comes to presenting more advanced types of calculations very quickly. All right, and then the last measure that I needed to create was the age measure. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be super sneaky, and I'm just going to paste a measure that I had. But before I do that, what I need to do is I'm going to quickly come in and rename some of these fields. So birth date, just make that a little bit more readable. Award year, and I had already used award year in the quick measure, but Power BI is smart enough to maintain changes. So to cascade a change like naming award year to something else into all of my other calculations that depend on that. So now if I go back to my quick measure, I can see that it's updated for award year, which is great because now I don't have any fear about making a change to a name of a table or a column or a measure, and then having to find all the places that it had been used previously. So Power BI protects you from having problems there. All right, and then the basic measure, I'm just going to copy it and paste, but to get the average of the the year, what I had done is I created a measure, and instead of doing this as a column, that's just award year minus uh, their birth year, which I could have done. You know, I could have had a separate column here. I want to teach you a technique that allows you to do some more advanced calculations that does not have to store it as a column, and then it just evaluates at runtime. And so some advantages as you grow in Power BI of this technique over time would be it just keeps your model size down, is a major one. But then also just allows you to take an approach where certain things, like this, can more easily be done within the context, or I guess not more easily, but it's it's a situation where as you get more advanced with DAX, you have opportunities to do more things as measures and kind of avoid some of the problems you would have with calculated columns in DAX. So once again, it's kind of a long-winded way to say uh, better practice for DAX over time as you grow in DAX would be trying to avoid calculated columns, and this is a technique that will allow you to do that. Anyway, I did not explain that well, but anyway, age when awarded, I'm averaging out the award year minus the year of the birth date. And average x is a function that gets me there. And the reason I used average x instead of sum x is if I'm looking at multiple award winners, I want to see their average age. I don't want to see the sum of their ages. So that's why I'd use this iterator function for average. But Power BI has numerous x functions like this for min x, max x, sum x, so on and so forth. I just happen to be using this one. This does not fulfill the requirement that I have where I needed to account for the 2020 award winner. And so what I had done when I looked at this is I had in 2020 this unknown value. And if I wanted to tweak my calculation to account for that, what I would need to do is do something like if is blank, and then I could say just whatever value for uh, this birth date. I want that result, if it's true, just to be something like unknown. And you don't have to do this, but this was one way to prevent it from appearing as a birth date of 2020, since this particular person's award year was 2020, and the birth date was blank, and it was being treated as zero, and that caused some problems when you're averaging things out. So I've got this wrapped within an if. So if the birth date's blank, present this. Otherwise, do my main calculation, and there's my three measures. All right, so let's get to the line chart now. Uh, and to do that, I will select it from visualizations, find my award year, drag that onto my axis. Another thing here, just kind of looking at it, the award year default summarization is set to sum. You could set that to do not summarize since it's a year, but because it's numeric, it was automatically set to summarize, just as an aside there. But now what I want to do is create my running total on my chart. So I drag in Laureates running total, and you can see it created this. And now I want to split it by continent to match the visual that I had. And I just have this birthplace continent EN field. And what I'll do, I'll just rename it. Anything I put in a visual, I want to have a little bit better formatting of the label. But you can see here, I drag it onto the legend, and now I've got this line chart. And the next thing I'm going to be doing is changing the formatting under format options for zoom slider just to enable this. So I search for it, and then I turn it on, and I'm going to disable it for the x-axis, but leave it on for the y-axis. And this gives me this sliding zoom type of capability. And then the last thing that I want to do is I use a different color scheme. So under view themes, I use the high contrast. Where are you? There we go. So I've got this high contrast theme for my visual. All right, so that's the basic line chart that we've got. And now I need to set up the report page tooltip. And to do this, I simply add a new page, and you don't have to call it tooltip, but you know, whatever you want to call it, go ahead and do that. Page size, generally you don't want a very, very large page. There is a tooltip size, but it tends to be pretty small. And then if I select custom here, let me just quickly double check on the size that I'd used. I used 950 by 420, so I'll kind of preserve that here. 950 by 420. And this is large enough to just add a table visual and have some basic information about these laureate winners on my report page tooltip. All right, so good enough. And then the requirement didn't state exactly what you had to put into the table, so I dragged in things like award year, category, which once again, if I'm here, uh, rename this just because it's going to be a label on a table. I don't want that underscore en to show. Full name, so on and so forth. I'm going to skip the renaming for time. Motivation is the kind of description of why they won the award, and you can play with the column formatting. The word wrap does exist as well. So um, if I have things that'll carry over to the next line, you'll see that as I reduce the column width, the header is preserved. And then I'm going to sort this. I'm going to actually use multiple sort and use shift. So I can shift click and get many things sorted here column wise and multi-sort 2 in this case. But if you had a sorting condition that had 2, 5, whatever number of columns, you could just use shift and then click and have that default sort. That's probably good enough for this tooltip page. I'm not going to go in and rename all those columns. And then the last thing is page information. I need to mark this as a tooltip page under formatting. And this makes it visible to any other page as a potential tooltip page. So here under my line chart now, I go under format and scroll all the way down to tooltip. And I set up report page tooltip as the type, but now I'm explicitly defining the page as my tooltip page. And this gives me the functionality now where if I hover over each of these years, it's going to give me detail about that particular year's winner. You'll also notice that this is, just as a wrap up here, this is filtering down to individuals. So there have been many award winners over time that are non-individual entities or non-governmental organizations, orgs like the Red Cross, so on and so forth, and other years. There has been no laureate, such as in some years in World War II. But for the most part, hopefully this gives you some aspect of how I can use um, the line chart in a new way by using that running total instead of just the value of the distinct count. So it's just using a stock chart in Power BI in a very creative and new way. And then kind of throwing some detail into it using this report page tooltip. And hopefully there's been some value in some of the techniques you learned throughout this challenge. And even though I was pretty scattered today on recording this video, hopefully you had some patience with me, and I appreciate the time. So thanks so much.